Chapter 4. The shock passed, but Norman still couldn't move his legs. He stared at the walls of the carriage, covered in blood. The blood on the floor of the corridor made it sticky. On the wall were signs of struggle. Marks to show that some people had struggled while they died, and smeared in blood, there stood one word: lust. Norman moved his flashlight around. He could hear someone sobbing softly. The woman. He turned around, illuminating every corner of the carriage. All he saw was blood and bodies. Bodies were torn, limbs pulled off bodies, and more blood. Then he heard it, the crunching and sucking. The squelching sound and the chewing. Norman turned around, searching for where the sounds were coming from. As if there were a lot of people with him in the carriage. "Hello?" he called, his voice coming out faint. Sweat dripped down his face, into his mouth, and down his chin. Norman swallowed. Something was there in the carriage. Someone was hiding somewhere. The sounds, though, they confused him. He called out again, hoping this time they would come out. "Help, help me," the woman said again. This time the voice was so close, almost as if it had been whispered in his ears. Norman cursed, flinching at the sound. "Fuck this," he said, turning to leave, but a loud shriek stopped him in his track. This time the sound was behind him. He knew that. He turned slowly, almost as if he was forcing his limbs to move. His flashlight was facing down, shining on the blood sheet on the floor, and his boots were covered in slick red. There was a silhouette there. He could see the movement of something. Then he heard a slurp, a belch, and a slow, low groan. The movement stopped, but Norman could feel himself being watched. The shape was still there. A dull white in the darkness. He lifted his torch slowly. "Hello?" Norman called. His head felt stiff, but he forced it up. The light went up the thin frame from the bare thighs up to the torn lacy panties, stained with filth and blood. Then up the torso until the breasts were under the light. "Ah! Help, help me," the woman said. This time the voice had changed. It had lost all the quality of age and became light and soft like a teenage girl's voice. The words come out like a strained groan, as if she was struggling with a hand trying to cover her mouth. Norman lifted the light to the woman's face to meet the pale milky eyes. The whole of it was the Scara. The rest was gone. She looked blind, but Norman knew she could see him when she screamed. Then someone groaned, and Norman moved his torch to the body next to the woman. Then he saw where her right hand was. The body next to the woman was the engineer. His chest was torn open, and the woman's hand was buried inside. "Help me," the woman said again, and then slowly pulled her hand out of the engineer's chest. In her hand, she was holding something bloody. She brought it to her mouth and tore a piece of it and chewed. As she ate, she stared at Norman. The conductor wanted to run, but he couldn't. Something held him in place. Even as his body trembled, and his heart raced like prey running from a predator. He stayed, locked in that position, his light shining on the naked woman as she ate the engineer. Her face was covered in blood, except for her eyes. Blood ran down her hands and belly, and legs. Her hair was wet and glossy under the bright light. The woman's eyes never left him. Even as she crept to him and then stood up straight to look him in the eye. Her vacant eyes held him prisoner. Then she leaned in, just close enough to whisper, "Rape me." Norman staggered back, his legs gave way, and his eyes widened in shock. He looked up, waving his hand to ward off the woman. All he felt was air. The woman was gone. She had vanished as if she had never been there. The corpse was there, though. There to confirm for Norman that she had been there. She had been so close that the girl could have killed him just as she killed the engineer. When Norman looked up, the engineer's wide, dead eyes were staring at him. The man's chest looked like a beast had gnawed it open. That wasn't what made Norman shake, though. Those eyes, he muttered. That face. He had gotten a good look when she came close. That is impossible. She is dead. The thoughts raced through his mind. He couldn't have mistaken that voice anywhere. Nor that face. He knew that woman. Had heard that voice before. But she was dead. She had been dead for so long that he had forgotten all about her and her death. Why? What is all this? When he came out of the carriage, his legs felt lighter. At first, he walked, his boots crunching on stones and sand. Then he started to run. He could feel something behind him. He didn't want to assume, but now he couldn't help it. Norman ran until he found the dining carriage. He pulled himself up, his heartbeat making his head swim with pain. His breath was ragged. His chest pricked as if 1,000 knives were cutting at him from the inside. "What the fuck, man?" one of the people in the dining area said. The way he rushed and shocked some of them. Norman waved, still trying to breathe. "Is that blood?" one of them asked again. Norman nodded. "The leading carriage. The engineer. They are all dead." Norman told them the story in bits. He told them about the woman but didn't add the part about the familiar girl's face. He gave them every skin-crawling detail of what he saw. When he finished, everyone in the dining carriage was shaking. Henry Foster was holding his wife close, and the priest was staring with wide eyes. Jerry turned to Howard and Colm, who looked just as grim as he was. "There is a girl eating people on the train?" Henry Foster asked, and Norman winced before nodding. He could still see it in his head, the way the woman's hand reached into the engineer's chest and plucked out organ after organ like she was getting into a refrigerator. "What the fuck are you talking about?" Colm said. His voice was taut and angry, but his eyes showed his fear. Even in the nearly dark carriage, Jerry could see it from where he sat. Colm had lived through a war, but not much of him came out of it with him. Jerry sighed and moved to stand up, but Howard was already walking toward their carriage. His footsteps made heavy stomps as he walked away. Jerry sat back, looking at Jolene. "We have to get out of here," Henry said. He was scared. His wife or lover was sobbing in his arms. Jerry wondered where the sharp, witty woman he saw on the bed some hours ago had gone. She had seemed larger than life on that bed. "You want to leave? And go where?" the priest asked. He had his fingers interlocked as if ready to kneel and ask God for some way out of this tribulation. Henry shrugged. "I don't know, but you think whatever is crawling out there or in here will wait for California to help before it starts taking us as it took the engineer?" "Calm the fuck down," Colm yelled. Everyone went silent and turned to him. There were few faces in the carriage and fewer lights, but everyone could see Colm. "You actually believe that some fucking beast in the form of a naked, crying woman is out there ready to plunge into you and eat your lousy hearts out? Really?" Colm scoffed and shook his head. Jerry chuckled where he sat, and Jolene gave him a sharp look. He was definitely scared, Colm continued, pointing at the conductor. Norman glared at him but didn't say anything. Trained soldiers have conjured worse things in their mind when the war begins, so I understand what fear can do. "Do you think there is nothing out there?" Henry asked. Colm shrugged as if he couldn't be bothered. "I don't know. I know that we are stuck here one way or the other." Howard's heavy footsteps came back, and with him were 3 shotguns. There was a general gasp when the others saw the guns. Howard gave one to Jerry as he passed by him and then gave the other to Colm. "I guess we will have to verify the conductor's tale," Howard said. Colm made a disgusted sound, but he stood up anyway. Jerry turned to Jolene, her eyes were wide and fixed on the gun, but he smiled and nodded. "Wait, hold up. Henry said, standing up. Am I the only one who is wondering why these have guns? What were their plans in the first place? Rob us? I wouldn't rob you if your shit could turn to gold, Howard said, walking to Henry. When he got close to the man, he leaned forward so the man could see his face properly. Henry took a step back. So, shut the hell up, Howard whispered. He turned to Jerry first and then Colm. We are going to check what the conductor saw out there. It would be stupid to wait here if something like that is really out there. You all should come. It will be easier to protect ourselves in a group. Or die in a group, Henry said. Howard grunted and pushed the carriage door open. Dust wafted in, and Howard jumped out. You should come with us, Jerry said as he followed Howard. Jolene nodded, carrying Grace. Her hand ached slightly, but she adjusted so much of the child's weight on her good arm. The others followed, too, even Henry and Mary. The conductor led them to where he had seen the horror displayed. He pointed to the door but did not move to walk to it. With his torch, he showed them, standing back. Howard hissed and gestured for Colm to open the door while he waited with his gun up, ready to blast even the devil back to hell. Colm opened the door slowly and pointed the flashlight inside. There was nothing. He cursed and pulled himself into the carriage, and Colm followed immediately behind. Howard chuckled. It was a mirthless sound. I guess he did piss himself for nothing, Colm said, his voice lighter than before. Jerry peered in and hissed, shaking his head. The conductor and the priest also came to look inside. Howard pulled the priest in, and the conductor turned around, confused. No, he whispered. You scared some of these good people for nothing, Colm said, but the conductor shook his head. The carriage looked cleaned. The floor looked like it had always looked before he saw the blood. There was no woman. The bodies were gone. They were right here, he said, pointing at the ground. She was there, crying and eating in the blood. There was so much blood. Did you fucking hit your head or you have been reading too much /horrors? Colm was getting angry. Open your damn eyes. There is nothing here. Howard pulled the conductor away towards the door. There was no need for fighting over something as unreasonable as whether there had been a naked woman-eating monster. It was better forgotten.
Isn't that the tunnel's exit?
Mary asked. Henry turned immediately to see what she was pointing to. The exit is still far. The conductor stopped talking when he saw the light at the end of the tunnel. It was a bit far, but it was there. When he looked at it earlier, it was a long dark tunnel. What the fuck is happening? We should check it out, Howard said, and the others agreed. They all walked towards the light, Howard in front, with his gun up just in case something jumped out of the darkness. 3 flashlights punctured the darkness until they got out into the light. Sunlight poured on them, making it difficult to see at first. After a few blinks, Jolene gasped at what lay in front of her. What the fuck is this? Colm asked, but no one answered. No one knew what to say. Not even Norman.